And on the line, I have Janet Carson. Good morning, Janet.
Hi, Tina. Good morning.
So Janet is what's your official title for the Gas Association, Janet?
Oh, Gas New Zealand.
Gas New Zealand? And you are the Chief Executive?
Chief Executive of Gas New Zealand, yeah.
And
so we represent, Tina, the whole spectrum of gas, renewable gases, biogas, biomethane, hydrogen gas, as well as the gases that we're more familiar with around LPG and natural gas. And in terms of our membership, we are all companies from gas producers of all of those gases I've just mentioned, to the distribution, the retailers and the gas appliance companies.
Right. And it'd be fair to say there's been a bit of pressure on your industry, especially the gases that we know. And you and I had a brief conversation about this, that they still have a part to play in our society. And I understand there's actually been civil unrest in countries, I think in America, where they're trying to filter out some of the gases because people are just saying that they're not as bad as what people think, and why should they be stopped from using them. So where are we sitting with the phase out or whatever of those gases that we all love for our barbecues and in my case my oven or range inside my house? What's actually happening?
So we have our carbon emission targets as a country, as a planet, that we need to meet in all areas, not just in energy, to stem off climate change and the impact it's having. When it comes to gas, we're focused on the future. So natural gas and LPG are still fueling New Zealand. Approximately 4% of natural gas is going directly to homes, but over a third of natural gas is used to generate electricity. So a discussion about gas, I think we often forget, is also a discussion about the sustainability and the decarbonisation, the further decarbonisation of electricity as well.
Right. And so what's the impact? What is actually the impact of that?
I think the impact is that there is a really big opportunity here and now for renewable gases and for people to invest in that, so that in much the same way that the gases we grew up with, Tina, natural gas and LPG, other people, the generation before, had coal gas. So we are in a constant state of evolution in how we do heat our homes and cook. In some economies, in India, for example, LPG is an aspirational fuel. So if you're using charcoal and woody biomass, for example, the LPG is a much cleaner burning. It's better for the environment, but it's saving lives. It increases mortality, the respiratory issues and things that they get from not having LPG is a big issue. So it's very, it's a demographic thing. And in New Zealand, we have an opportunity to use waste from landfill, from our sewage, from our agricultural industries to produce a different sort of gas, one that's sustainable because it's net zero carbon. And that over time will replace. We have enough feedstock currently in New Zealand to change out the natural gas for biogas tomorrow if the facilities are in place.
Oh, wow.
For home and business use.
Yep.
So not for the total natural gas uses that we have, especially for heavy industry and petrochemical products.
Yep.
But for homes and businesses, how we're consuming it every day when we get up and have endless hot water and go to restaurants in the evening, we have enough feedstock to make biogas to replace that usage.
And so again, we've got an infrastructure issue, obviously, in terms of supporting that. And if I were like me, we've got hot water gas, or gas hot water, and I've got gas for my range. So if tonight, if in the next year they said that's it, you're not allowed to use that anymore, you're going to a biogas, what difference would I see?
That would be detrimental. You'd be broke for a start because you'd have to change out all of your appliances, and I guess you'd have to go to electricity because that's the only alternative for home use energy.
So it's not that you can fill the gas tanks with the new gas and use that. Just it's not that. It doesn't work like that.
Oh, I see what you mean. If they turned off the natural gas tomorrow. Yes. Well, with LPG, they're producing bio-LPG overseas.
Right.
So that's an option as well. We could bring that in tomorrow. But, within a quick turnaround, we aren't producing biogas that we could immediately pump into homes. That's the investment we're looking for. Right. And, we expect to have material amounts of biogas in the system by 2030. So that's kind of the time frame.
It's not very far away. That's only 6 years away.
Yeah, that's right. And a lot has to happen in between. And I'm glad you said it's not far away because, often I give that figure and people go, oh, that's so far away. But no, if we're looking over the long term, we have to make things that aren't quick fixes. Quick fixes, aren't sustainable most of the time.
So if you were in the right world with the government that was supporting this in the transition and what you wanted as an industry, what things do you need right now to get us to where we need to go?
We need people to invest now, and we want government to invest as well. So I'm talking about green energy certificates, for example, tradable certificates. So alongside an effective ETS, that would provide a really strong incentive to the market to invest in the infrastructure needed.
Aren't you going to have a problem with that, though, Janet, because the ETS is not quite worked out the way people thought it would? And we've seen quite a fluctuation in prices, and it's not is operating well as what we thought it would. So if you're advocating for something that sort of sits alongside the ETS, is there going to be enough public confidence in that to get them to invest?
No, I totally agree. The ETS alone is not going to solve this issue. If it was, we would have these projects up and running already. We do believe that it needs further incentivisation and tradable certificates and setting renewable gas targets and, changing perceptions of how people see gas, so not just as a fossil fuel, but as a valid long-term fuel for New Zealand, so we can have renewable electricity and renewable gas, then we need to start investing in that alongside an effective ETS, but in the same way that we incentivise electricity and renewable electricity developments. We can have both. It would make us a world leader in renewable energy.
Right. If you don't get the investment, what's the worst case scenario?
We are investing already, so I do believe that the investment will continue. The worst case scenario is it takes us longer to get that material amount of renewable gas into homes and businesses. So I think it's a timing thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating. Yeah. I just didn't actually understand that there's, the opportunities to invest. I think that's a really interesting thing. But, I mean, you are right. You're suffering with a bit of a perception around the fact that gas is considered to be bad. How do you get over that?
Yeah, well, I don't know. You've been to the airport lately. Did you see that big billboard, treasure? There is treasure in our waste, and
yes.
We need to invest in informing people, but like engaging them in a very human way.
Yeah.
People don't see the energy in waste, and educating them isn't going to be a rational discussion. We need to get people quite excited about that possibility.
And the gas industry itself, is it mainly like the Tiwai smelter is owned by Australians, as someone suggested. The steel mill is owned by Blue. Is it Blue? It's not Blue Smoke, Blue something. Is the gas industry largely owned by offshore interests?
No, it's a mix. So there's a lot of, international companies, but most of them have New Zealand. So New Zealand arms as well. So if I'm thinking about the gas retailers, they're mostly New Zealand owned.
Yeah.
If we're looking at gas producers, they're a mix of New Zealand and international ownership. But one of the things that I am seeing in terms of how do we encourage investment is a huge interest from Australian companies who want to come over and help us. But they see a opportunity for themselves, obviously, but it's also an opportunity for our country to invest here in biogas opportunities. So, we probably will see a lot of partnership. I think what we'll also see is a lot of community and iwi partnership, because almost by definition, these are local projects. If we're using local waste, you want to use that source. You don't want to be bringing it in from other places.
You'd sort of start to think about Gisborne and all of that slash that's sitting there. If you had somewhere to boil it all up, do you get the gas off something like that?
Yeah, you do. And people say that compost is probably more viable. When you make biogas, you get both, because you're producing a gas through the process, but it also leaves a solid behind, which is an intense nutrient that can be used in agriculture. So it's, and just, for homes and gardens as well.
So is there any work going on around that?
Level?
Is there any work going on around that in terms of biogas production on the East Coast, considering the amount of slash that they've got up there? I suppose in some respects it's not that much when you think about it, because they must need a hell of a volume over a long period of time. So there has been research done, recent research over the last 2 to 3 years on feedstock supply and what would be viable. So Worley's has done research as well on feedstock and opportunities for bio-LPG. Yeah. What we need to grow is people producing this stuff. So we've got the renewable gas, the biogas project in Reparoa, and next year they've partnered with First Gas, which is the major gas distributor in New Zealand. They will be blending biogas with natural gas into homes and businesses in that area this time next year. Right. So, we're a year away. We're not that far behind Australia. They've just done their first, I think next month, they inject their first lot of biogas into the Sydney gas grid. Wow. And so, we're following behind. But I think what we're going to see is, the first project's really expensive. The second one, it all starts, the economy of scale becoming a lot more achievable. So we will see development speed up over the next 5 years. And is there any areas in New Zealand where you're likely to see the development of biogases ahead of other areas? Yeah, that's a good question. What we will see is more development in the North Island of that biomethane opportunity, because the infrastructure is already here, the pipeline. Right. But we haven't at this point got sort of key areas for investment. I think, we do, but companies have their sort of own areas, and that's largely to do with where they're operating currently. Yeah. So, no, I think it's an open book. But, I think actually motivated communities and also iwi groups, like the Māori economy is going to be I have to let you into a secret. One of our great iwi leaders is listening to us. She's just texted me. She's a bit sick, but she's listening to you and me, Janet. Oh, good, because I think there's a huge opportunity for iwi in this. Yeah. Because it's not just an energy opportunity, it's a way of dealing with waste in a sound, environmentally friendly way. Yeah. It's a holistic approach, and I think this appeals, I'm a bit biased probably on that front, but I think that approach appeals to iwi more than it does to a lot of companies that we deal with, or their understanding of what that means is often more developed, put it that way. And so where do you see governments part in all of this? I mean, we've seen the big subsidies for New Zealand steel, which, I struggle with. And we're not seeing the same level of support for Tiwai, which is interesting in itself. And your partner is heavily involved with the government relations. As I said, you're like the power couple of the power industry. It's quite fascinating, really. You haven't seen the likes of that probably since Matthew Hooton and Kathy Stoddard during the Fonterra days, where you had a husband and wife team who were doing a lot of advocating for a particular industry. It's interesting where government is putting its subsidies, and is it a subsidy that you would be looking for or help, or how would a good government help the industry?
Yeah, I think they need to be really careful in how they do incentivise it. We feel that the tradable certificate is probably the best way to stimulate investment for renewable gas rather than a straight-out subsidy.
Yep.
We need to incentivise the whole chain. It's about making sure that the demand is there, people are going to buy it. And that will take, we actually think the regulatory measures are going to be more important.
Yeah, Jerry Brownlee and I talked about that this morning, because I see that. I think the Transpower comment from John, and I can't remember his second name, from Transpower, about the fact if you want to put transmission lines in, it's a 7 year stint, and 2 years to build and 5 years to get the permissions. And so the process around the RMA, and people are looking at the new RMA Mark II and just crawling into a little ball, really, because they are so concerned about the level of bureaucracy and the hoops that people are going to have to go through under the new regime, which is supposed to be easing up stuff around what we're talking about right now, but it's not. And it's a scary time when you've got all of this forward thinking that you see in Southland, and yet we've got all of this imposition coming at us from a regulatory point of view, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah. We, I would definitely agree with that. We've just finished a biogas tour of Australia, and one thing they seem to be more advanced on than we are is how quickly they can get through that regulatory regime and hoops. So I'm not sure what they're doing there to facilitate it, but they certainly managed to get projects from concept to actual more speedily than we do. Of course, we don't want to cut corners and have an environmental impact as a result, but we definitely don't think that has to be an outcome of it. It's the layers of bureaucracy.
Yeah,
I thought Rob Drury, you might want to talk about that, Tina.
I missed his presentation. So summarise it for me, Janet. Just let us know just what it was like.
So, he set a vision for a renewable energy Southland, but he also talked about, you've just got to be able to make these things happen quickly as well. So if you look at renewable energy, he looks at Queenstown as being the entry point to Murihiku for a renewable energy hub, and he talks about the whole tourist experience. So, electricity levies, which would essentially be tourism levies, because you're increasing, the number that are going through. Yep. And then the electric carts that will ferry them around the city, and not just electric carts, but autonomous ones. Yeah. And then getting that power cable in from Frankton to Kingston. Yep. And coupling that with a cycleway as well. So, you're getting the alarm bells. Well, it's a wonderful thing to aim for, and there was huge support for it. But the question you were just asking, you can just feel already it's palpable, the regulatory obstacles that achieving it will probably put up.
And I must admit, though, and it's like the Hananui project, the aquaculture project in Southland, it was on the fast track, but to get it to the fast track was a bloody long time. And so it was not as fast tracked as what I thought the fast track would be. and it's probably been a learning curve for everyone, that one. But there was some talk around economic zones for renewable energy, and I would hope, and I did ask Venture Southland this question, what work are they doing on what they need to change? What is the best practice for a regulatory environment if you're dealing with these issues, which is going to make the planet a better place? So you would think that every time you come to a problem, you want to go biff it, and so you almost do an experimental area where you chuck off the shackles of the Resource Management Act in that particular area and have a crack at getting stuff through with the minimum level of bureaucracy and see what we end up with at the end of it. And I always think that we need some sort of economic zone in New Zealand where we test that theory out. What happens if we had bugger all regulation, but the one single driver was don't hurt the bloody planet or the environment while you do this, and if you do, mitigate it and make it better. Not worse, not the same, make it better. And if you just had some simple principles like that, then we would be able to move ahead. But I really, really struggle, even with all of the amazing discussions we've had this morning around people who are right at the cutting edge of the stuff, including you, that we will not get there because we're going to be jammed up in the big bloody red tape bollocks that we are as a country, which is not going to let us get to where we need to go.
Yeah, yes, and I would add to that the health and safety and that whole regulatory regime as well. So just like the environment, vitally important, but it shouldn't take so long to get approval to test a renewable gas mix, and it did.
Yes.
We've been testing these blends for some time, but, just getting approval to have it tested because of that regime can be really challenging.
Yeah.
So, that alongside it would be awesome.
Yeah. Lots to get through, Janet, and I don't envy your job. Well, I sort of do in a way. It'd be so cool to be involved with an industry like you are, which is really trying to change things and do the right thing too, against a backdrop of sort of being seen as the bloody enemy, which is it's a bit crazy, really, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Thanks a lot for the opportunity to talk about it.
And it's been interesting because we've only had one bloke on this morning. All of the guests this morning have been women, and it didn't end up that way. It's just that we have all of these amazing women who are leading the charge in some of this energy space. So I think that's been amazing, and all creds to you. You can articulate your position pretty well, and you're a strong advocate for your industry. And here's hoping that we actually get a better regulatory environment in the future. So go well and enjoy the last of the conference, and we'll catch up for a wine, no doubt, over the next few months. Thanks, Janet.
Excellent. Thanks. Look forward to it. Bye, Tina.